Okay, praise the Lord. Man, Satan is pissed off. He tried everything so I wouldn't tell this Tamar story. Oh, I hate the devil. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. You hear me? Oh, I done tried this video 3 times. And my everything was acting up. The sound on my laptop, the computer was acting up. I've been on the Microsoft chat since early this morning. And I said, I'm determined to get this word out and get this story out. Oh, they number Satan. Okay. Well, we gonna we gonna put the devil under our feet and we gonna tell this story. We gonna tell the story about Tamar. A lot of preachers don't preach about it, and they don't teach about it. They teach about uh, um, Joseph being betrayed by his brothers and about Joseph, but they don't teach about Tamar. Okay, we gonna do this thing. Okay, um, let's start with the I'm gonna find that link that I had. Okay, from Growing Christian Ministries. I gotta find that. And then I gotta find a YouTube video that I had too. And I find it too. I'm gonna put it's growingchristians.org devotions, the story of Judah and Tamar. I'm gonna put the link to that on the description. But I want y'all to hear this video. Then you'll see why the devil was hindering me from getting this story out. Okay, I want you to hear this video. It's obvious it's the devil. Okay, it's from Bible Unboxed. Oppression and Justice, Judah and Tamar, Genesis chapter 38. And I want y'all to read the whole chapter, Genesis chapter 38, from the Amplified Bible and from the New International Version of the Bible. Okay, I want you to hear this. Since I can't, I, I, I don't have a reaction video app, so we can watch the video together. Okay, I want you to hear this. Wait a minute, it's a commercial.
You're always on the go. You know nothing ever stands still. From work.
It's a commercial.
Thank you.
I'm skipping the ad. Okay, go. Let's rewind this. I want you to hear this.
People love timeless classic love
Okay,
stories.
you hear this?
Titanic, Romeo and Juliet. But just like those stories kind of have some messed up aspects, so too does Genesis 38, the story of Judah and Tamar. A destitute widow disguises herself as a prostitute, tricks her father-in-law into sleeping with her, and then he later tries to have her burned alive. That's messed up. This series is all about
It sure is messed up.
Obscure, strange Bible passages in the Bible and what a reader's supposed to do with them. Genesis 38 is not just a messed up story, it's also an unexpected cutaway from the main story. You see, it happens in the middle of the well-known story of Joseph being sold into slavery in Egypt. But then the story just forgets about Joseph and jump cuts to Judah, Joseph's older brother, and this story of his daughter-in-law, Tamar. Also, notice how DreamWorks conveniently leaves this chapter out of King of Dreams. So let's start with Tamar. Before we continue, here's another strange cutaway. Is it pronounced Tamar or Tamar? Google, in Genesis 38, is it Tamar or Tamar? have it. So Tamar marries Judah's firstborn son, whose name was, that was actually his name, It turns out he was a jerk, described as evil, and God kills him. So with Tamar now a widow, it was customary for the brother-in-law to marry the widow of his brother, if he was able. So Judah's second son, Onan, marries Tamar. Turns out Onan was also very selfish, and God kills him too. So Judah only has one more son left, Shelah. But Judah has now become very superstitious. And he doesn't want his son to marry Tamar, so he just leaves her a widow. All the while promising that one day, when his son grows older, she will be wed to him. But the years go by, and Tamar sees that this is not going to happen. See, being a widow in the ancient world was a bad category to be in. There was no health care, and with no family to look after you, it could be a death sentence. Now, Tamar knew that, so she ended up taking matters into her own hands. She disguised herself as a prostitute and went to the town where Judah was working. Now, Judah's wife had passed away, and it had been a few months, so you can imagine he was open to paying for a prostitute. When he saw the prostitute, he didn't recognize Tamar, but he wanted to sleep with her, and he offered a baby goat as payment. The disguised Tamar took some personal items from him as a deposit until he was able to pay her: a seal, cord, and staff. A few months later, Tamar is home and visibly pregnant. When Judah finds out, he is furious that Tamar has become pregnant outside of wedlock, and he calls her a harlot. He even sentences her to be burned alive. But in a turn of legal brilliance, as she is brought out for punishment, she exclaims that she can identify the man whose child she bears. And she produces the personally identifying items that Judah had given the disguised prostitute. Judah realizes that he has wronged Tamar in not providing for her a husband, and he exclaims that she is more righteous than he is. Finally, Tamar gives birth to twins, and that is the last we hear of her. So why is this crazy, weird, messed up story in the Bible? I mean, for starters, this is one of the only times in the Bible that God actually kills someone. Let's start with that. Well, in the ancient world, in the Israelite mindset, it was probably the way they understood whatever tragic fate befell the two wicked brothers. The writers are trying to say that ultimately God is responsible for life and death. I think the bigger problem is Judah, though. Later in the story, Judah receives a great blessing in Egypt, and yet right now, he's the sort of father who would raise two wicked children, the sort of guy who would leave his daughter-in-law to die a widow and then sleep with a prostitute, and then have his daughter-in-law executed for the same thing that he did. Doesn't really sound like a man worthy of a great blessing. Under ancient customs, he was actually responsible for looking after Tamar, but his superstition got the better of him, and it appears that he was too scared to marry off his last son to Tamar because he thought he was going to die. So with Tamar getting older, she had to take matters into her own hands. And the story has this wicked sense of irony as to how it happened. You see, Judah tricked his dad into believing his brother Joseph was dead with the blood of a baby goat. And now Judah is going to offer a baby goat as payment to a prostitute, which will be his undoing. Judah's actions have circled back on himself. And when Tamar proves that Judah got her pregnant, he knows he's done the wrong thing, and he calls her righteous. But does he get off too easy in the Bible? How does Judah deserve a great blessing from his family? Or why does his name deserve to be emblazoned on heaven's gates in Revelation 21? This passage actually highlights the grace of God, who is merciful to Judah even in his sinfulness. And it's clear that in this moment of the story, it's a turning point for the character of Judah, who undergoes a great change of heart. What about Tamar? She gets what she needs in a really messed up way. And yet, she's called righteous, and in the big story of the Bible, she's held up as a hero, being one of only a handful of women mentioned in Jesus' genealogy. And while we might not find long lists of names very interesting and skip over those chapters, for an ancient Jewish reader, there would have been few greater honors. Tamar is considered righteous and is honored even though she acted out this sexual taboo. Her actions would not be considered morally upright by many social standards, ancient or modern. Maybe this should give us reason to pause and consider where we draw our lines on sin. For example, Jesus teaches in Luke 12:48 that for whoever is given much, much is expected. Tamar only had little, and she did her best to bring about justice. Judah, on the other hand, had been given much, and more was expected of him. In this story, there is a greater concern with care for the needy and responsibility to the community than her sexual exploits. Now, that doesn't mean that the Bible is saying people can do whatever they want, but it should cause believers to at least consider the rigidness of certain moral standards. You see, those who have been marginalized in society sometimes have to stand up for their rights in a way that might be considered morally dubious. So maybe this story is an invitation to be slow to judge and to consider carefully people's circumstances and motivations.
All right.
Genesis 38 is included to show the reader that even though people do messed up things, God is still working behind the scenes to accomplish his plans. In the Christian tradition, it is ultimately Jesus, a leader who would not fail, who would come from the line of Judah and Tamar out of this messy circumstance. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something new about Genesis 38. If you liked the video, make sure you share it around, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.
Okie dokie. So I'm going to read. I'm not going to read all of the article. You can look up the link and read the whole article yourself. But I'm going to just read the bottom part of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Y'all can read the whole thing. I'm going to get to the part where it says practical applications of the article. It's number one, don't be too quick to point the finger at other sinners. When Judah heard that Tamar was expecting a child, he was angry. Bring her out and let her be burned, he exclaimed. But he pointed the finger too quickly, and he had to acknowledge that he was the bigger sinner. Oh, my. It's easy to accuse other people of wrongdoing, isn't it? It's human nature to see the sins of others, but to fail to recognize our own sins. That's why Jesus said, why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? Luke 6:41. Let's be aware of our own sinfulness and failings and not be so quick to point the finger at other sinners. Number two, fulfill your family obligations. Okay. The story of Judah and Tamar shows repeated failures to fulfill family obligations. Fulfilling our responsibilities to our family members is very important to God. This truth is taught in both Old and New Testaments. Our responsibilities within the immediate family are found, for example, in Ephesians 5:22 to 6:4. 1 Timothy 5:8 gives us a graphic warning about failing to fulfill our obligations to our families, including extended family members. But those who won't care for their relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the true faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. As obedient believers, let's fulfill our family responsibilities. Okay, so you know what I get out of this story of Tamar is that she was a bad sister. I mean, if you want to read some drama and read about justice and, you know, if you want to really get to the nitty gritty, you ain't got to watch no Young and the Restless or Bold and Beautiful or Law and Order. Just go to the Bible. Just read that Bible. You know, she was better than Mary Porras, I'm telling you. You know, she was like, oh, hell no. You're not going to blame me, you know, for knocking me up. Ain't this yours? This is yours right here. This is your staff. This is your stuff. You is the baby father. Judah, you is the baby father. You know, she wasn't playing with his tail. Yup. And let's go to this article. I'm going to go further up in the article. Okay. I ain't going to read all of it. but background notes. Okay. Uh, Um, okay, let's go to the background notes. Where okay, this part of this chapter revolves around what became known as the Levirate law of marriage. The word Levirate comes from the Latin word for brother-in-law. This law stated that if a married woman died, stated that if a married man died without an heir, his next in line eligible brother was to marry the widow. He was to father an heir who would receive the brother's inheritance and carry on his brother's name. This widow would then have the joy of motherhood, and she would have a child who could care for her in the future. God approved of this practice because it was later included in the Mosaic Law, Deuteronomy chapter 25, and is also seen in the book of Ruth. Judah's first son, was wicked in the Lord's sight, and the Lord took his life. His sin isn't identified, but it must have been very serious. God also disapproved of the attitude of Judah's second son, Onan, and took his life as well. After Onan's death, Judah told Tamar she would marry his third son, Shelah, when when he was old enough. Judah never followed through with that promise. Okay, he lied. So Tamar decided to take matters in her own hands. That's right. Her end goal was honorable, to preserve the line of Judah so the inheritance and blessings of the covenant would continue. However, she went about it the wrong way. She plotted to trick Judah as he traveled to share sheep with his friends. Sheep shearing was a happy time with a party-like atmosphere, and during this time, Tamar was able to seduce Judah. Worship rituals of the pagan Canaanite fertility gods included fornication and prostitution. So it was not unusual in that culture for a prostitute to sit by the roadside. However, the fact that it was a cultural norm doesn't justify Tamar's sinful methods. And just because prostitution was culturally acceptable doesn't mean that Judah was justified in his sinful actions. Although this passage of scripture does not appear to condemn Judah or Tamar for their sinful nature, certain for their sinful behavior, God certainly does not take sexual sin lightly. The seal that Judah gave Tamar was probably a cylinder seal. These these two these small stone cylinders were engraved with the owner's distinctive design and were worn on a cord around the neck in ancient times. When they were rolled over wet clay or wax, they were almost as distinctive as a fingerprint or signature as an identifying mark of its owner. Judah's staff would have also had his own identifying marker. So when Tamar became pregnant, there was no mistake that Judah was the man who was responsible. Boy, she was a bad sister. Okay, she played detective. She played FBI. She got that nigga's fingerprint. She got the staff with his engravings on it. You know, you know. But could you imagine what he was doing? He like, you bitch, you whore. And she like this. She got that staff. Hey, this yours? Ain't this yours? Shit. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. But you know what gets me is how could he not know that that was his daughter-in-law? You know, that must have been a bad disguise she had on. You know, that must have been a real tight prostitution disguise. You know, but you know what it was? She knew that he was horny because his wife had died. Judah's wife had passed, and time went by, and she was strategizing. She knew that he wasn't. She knew that his youngest son was old enough to have a, to hook up with her, and she knew that Judah wasn't fulfilling his promise, you know. So she said, okay, this old guy horny, my father-in-law horny. A time went by, his wife dead and everything. I'm a trap his behind, you know. But anyway, yep, she wanted justice. She knew that women back in them days was the tacapole. She knew how sneaky his butt was. She knew that Judah. She she knew how deceptive he was with his father, with Jacob, lying to Jacob, saying that Joseph did. She knew he was a sneaky son of a gun, you know. Whether she was Canaanite or not, a coin, no, a coin, you know. Well, anyway, what blessed me is that despite all of what happened, just like with Rahab, you know how Rahab lied to the king, lied. It said that lied about the spies and everything. It's same thing. Tamar was deceptive, but look how God blessed the both of them. Both of them was Canaanite women. Rahab was Canaanite woman. Tamar was Canaanite. Rahab was a whore, was a prostitute for real, and Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute. But they both became a part of the line of Jesus. So that goes to show God's grace and mercy. You can't judge a book by its cover, you know. Just like I said about Rahab, you don't know what kind of prayers Tamar was having in between for her waiting all that time for a Selah to get of age, for her to have a child by Judah's last son. But you know what? When you read Genesis chapter 38, he had some nasty he had some nasty, deceptive sons. His son owned and jerked off. The Bible say that he wasted his semen on the ground. In other words, in layman's terms, he took his ding-ling and was jerking off on the ground. Instead of having sex with his wife and getting her pregnant. That's really selfish. Really, really nasty and really selfish. So God took him out. God killed the bastard. It wasn't about him masturbating and jerking off. It was about him not fulfilling the promise to his brother's wife. And God don't play that. So God killed his butt, and God honors. He was hearing the prayers of Tamar's prayers by her being a widow, and she probably was crying and pleading and talking to God, praying to God, and just was lonely and horny and just feeling bad. And just as a woman, just feeling bad. And God was hearing her prayers, God was hearing it. So she took justice in her own hands. She took the thing, took the scar and everything, and it sat on the road, I tell you. But I'm gonna put the link to this article in the description, and I'm gonna put the video link today. But what y'all think about this story of Tamar? Yeah, the Bible, it's filled with some good stories. Filled with some good stories. Yeah, some good story. And then there's another Tamar in the Bible. David's a daughter that was raped by her brother. But I'm not talking about that Tamar. I'm gonna talk about this one because she became a part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Okay, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy the Bible reading. Take your time, read it from the Amplified Version of the Bible and from the New International Version, from the NIV Bible. God bless you.